plastic is an everyday part of our lives. It is found in our clothing, our cosmetics, and is even a component of many types of packaging. And in many industries too, it is nearly impossible to imagine working without plastic. More than 320 million tons of plastic are now produced every year, and the trend is continuously rising. But what happens to all this plastic after it has fulfilled its purpose for us? Although a small amount is recycled, a truckload of trash still ends up in our oceans every minute. As a result, there are currently more than 150 million tons of plastic waste floating in the ocean, and counting. Due to the currents and winds, the garbage is distributed and can be found everywhere in the oceans. But in some places, a particularly large amount of plastic gathers. These are called garbage patches, and there are currently 5 of them. All of them are located near the equator, where different currents from north and south meet and form huge surface swirls. The largest is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch between Hawaii and California. With 1.6 million square kilometers and over 80,000 tons of plastic, it is about as large as the size of Central Europe. Researchers from the Ocean Cleanup have been crossing the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 30 boats, collecting samples to get a more accurate idea of what we often hear referred to as the garbage continent. What they discovered is that there are an estimated 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic in the garbage patch. Large plastic pieces, such as fishing nets and debris, as well as bottles and plastic bags, make up the bulk of the weight. Microplastics, which are particles less than 5 millimeters in size, make up another share, with about 6,000 tons of them in the garbage patch. About 20% of the plastic, according to the Ocean Cleanup's research, comes from ships, boats and offshore platforms that dump their trash intentionally or even unintentionally, such as through storms. The rest comes from land. China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam and Thailand in particular play a major role. The major industrialized nations export their waste to these countries, and since no functioning recycling systems have been established there, the waste ends up in landfills and is transported from there by wind and via rivers into the oceans. A small part, according to the researchers, also comes from our sewage treatment plants. These are unable to filter microplastic particles which come from our cosmetics and clothing. Because of the never-ending flow of plastic, the garbage patch has grown 100-fold in the last 40 years and will continue to grow at an exponential rate if we don't do something about it. However, only 60% of the plastic is capable of floating, so a large part sinks and ends up on the seabed. Since these regions are often difficult to access, there are no exact figures of how much trash is really down there. What is certain, however, is that plastic decomposes much more slowly on the ocean floor than on the surface, where there are fewer currents and a much lower oxygen content. At the surface, on the other hand, it decomposes more quickly into tiny microplastic particles due to solar radiation, currents and wind. The microplastic particles not only float freely in the ocean, but can be found in higher concentrations in the pack ice at the polar ice caps. Thanks to global climate change, up to 1 trillion microplastic particles may be released from the melting ice in the next few years. A grocery bag, for example, takes 10 to 20 years to completely pulverize. A styrofoam cup takes 50 years, and a PET bottle floats in the ocean for up to 450 years. Fishing lines even take 600 years to decompose, according to projections. To what extent this is true, or whether they might take even longer, cannot yet be said, of course, since we have not yet experienced these 450 years since the first PET bottle. Until then, larger pieces of plastic are floating loose in the ocean as a danger to many animals. Turtles have already been found with straws caught in their nostrils. Seabirds often strangle themselves in old fishing nets or other plastic snares and die in agony. But even when the plastic has decomposed into microplastics, it still poses a threat to the environment. Although the exact extent is not yet clear, marine animals are often found to have mistaken small pieces of plastic for food and starved to death with a lot of plastic in their stomachs. According to recent research, 2/3 of seabirds now carry plastic in their stomachs. Some of the microplastics are only the size of plankton, so they are also eaten by whales and other fish. Of course, the plastic also ends up on our plates when we eat seafood. Plastic has even been detected in human feces. There is still no definite solution as to how we can get a handle on the plastic problem in our oceans, but reducing waste and banning plastic bags in many countries is a small step in the right direction. In order to save the ecosystem, a global collective thinking is necessary, because we're all responsible and only together we can act effectively against it.